Marc, thank you so much for coming to Can't Shovel Hurricanes. And not before I even start grilling you on a bunch of stuff, because there's so much information in your head. You took the time out of what's arguably the most busiest time of the year for you. And for somebody who runs a organization that crosses borders and being the head of it, I mean, I'm grateful to you, both as an individual, but as a subject matter expert. I refer to people on the podcast for the most part as transplants. And that's people that have made the journey either usually from Canada down here, but now there's like this abbreviated term of people that are coming from California or coming from New York and have uprooted their lives for political reasons, tax reasons, opportunity, the beach, a plethora of things, kids, education system. Like there's so much we can go on here, but you're like a triple transplant. You're like a Canadian, Cali, Floridian guy who's crossed the borders. And you're also a lawyer and an accountant, and you can add so much value to people listening to this that want to come across, don't know how to do it, don't know where to start. And I could tell you from my own experience, it was a two-pronged phone call. It was an immigration lawyer who was gracious enough to introduce me to you. And based on the conversation I had with the both of you, I realized, okay, we can put the team together to make this all happen. And it's been an amazing trip. And not only that, as a human being, I find you to be incredible and kind and genuine. So I know it's a long preamble, but tell me, man, you just left what people love, which is, California to Florida. Why?
Well, first of all, let me say thanks for having me.
Dude, it's my pleasure.
Glad to be here. And you're right. It is a busy time of year, but for you, anytime.
Appreciate that, brother.
I always make myself available.
I appreciate that.
That's probably a good question to be asking. Why did I leave California to come to Florida?
Who wants to leave California, right?
Well, lots of factors. Let me give you a bit of history. So I've been in California for about 25 years.
Wow.
Originally, I was born and raised in Toronto.
Where in Toronto?
Markham.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's a suburb outside of Toronto.
Yeah.
That's where I grew up, basically.
Right.
Went to university in Toronto, graduated from Ryerson.
So did I.
Oh, wow. I didn't even know we have that in common. That's amazing.
Yeah. So did I.
And then from there, moved to California. So that was about 25 years ago. And back then, California was booming. I mean, the whole American economy, the country was.
What year was that? Do you remember?
It's around late 90s. It was the Clinton years.
Okay.
Bill Clinton was president.
Okay.
And America was in its heyday, and having had the opportunity, I had a green card.
What brought you over though from Canada? Like, was there something specific that you wanted to go to, or did you say why California?
Well, I mean, why not California?
Yeah,
it's California.
That's kind of how I feel about Florida right now.
And that's another reason, why I left California to come to Florida is because nowadays things are transitioning away from California now to Florida.
Why?
Lots of factors.
Give me the top three. Well, give me your reasons for doing it.
I mean, I think number one, you've got taxes.
Yeah.
Right.
What's the differential from Cali to?
Well, taxes, cost of living.
Okay.
Okay. And I think there's also some political reasons as well for people to leave.
Sure. California
and come to Florida. So, you add those all together and Florida is a great destination.
Right. How long have you been in Florida now?
Since like November.
Oh, so it's raw. Like it is, you're still in like even though you don't need to go through some of the things that Canadians would do to come over, like green card, visas, you have a social, you have a green card, you have these things. It's still got to be like, it's got to be such a massive transition.
Well, one thing I tell my clients, and for those people old enough to remember, there used to be a guy on TV, Cy Sperling, Hair Club for Men.
Okay.
Which I could probably use his services right now. But his tagline was, I'm not just the owner, I'm also a client.
Right. Yeah, I remember that.
Remember those commercials?
Yeah.
And sure enough, that's become my life. One of the things about me and my experiences is I'm not just, the owner of the business that specializes in doing US and Canadian taxes and advising, individuals and businesses, but I'm also my own client. I've got my, ties and connections and businesses and, all that to Canada and in the, ties to Canada and the US.
Right.
And I have to deal with it on a regular daily basis. Right. It's never just a one and done thing for
personally
me.
And professionally.
Personally and professionally. Like I run a business in Canada, I run a business in the US. And so, and I've got property assets in both countries. So at the end of the day, it's like, it's a never ending story when it comes to dealing with cross-border taxes just in my own life. Right.
Right.
And so that's why, it's when clients work with me, you're not just dealing with somebody who's had to learn it in a textbook or
right.
is only just really exposed to it from one angle. With me, I'm fully immersed in it and I'm dealing with it day to day, and I've got to think about it today, tomorrow, 5 years out. And when you're going through what I go through, right? You can really put yourself in the position of the client.
It's amazing how Michael Narin from Visa Place, who introduced us, who was our immigration lawyer, and the only reason I haven't had him on the podcast yet is because right now he's traveling and he's going to be coming back. Him and his wife are going to be incredible guests, and I have to have him on. But he told me, what his experience was like with you, and I think what makes you so good at what you do is the knowledge of tax laws, and you're both a lawyer and an accountant, right?
I'm a CPA in both the US and Canada and a lawyer in California.
Right. Okay. So that, speaks to the technical aspect of credentials, but there's so much more to that to people that are moving down. It's an emotional aspect. There is an aspect to it that goes far beyond just the numbers and logistics of how to navigate the CRA and the IRS. You have people like myself that have moved over or moving over families, expanding multiple businesses, have assets, across the two borders now. You understand the personal aspect because you are not only the owner, you're also
my own client.
Your own client, right? So you understand that there's something to it. So when you introduced us, I'm like, the biggest factor to me is that you're gonna get it, and that outside of the fact that you're really easy to talk to, you're approachable, and you're available. You spend so much time navigating. My wife and I think probably the overwhelming majority of that time was not speaking technically, was speaking about, like, you were saying things like, it's going to be all right. There's more of a market share here. There's more opportunity here. If you're willing to hustle, you'll be just fine. Don't worry about it. Like, that kind of stuff goes a long way to people that are like essentially taking a very comfortable life and uprooting it to start over, which is what you've done now twice. You moved from Canada to California, from California to Florida, and you're reestablishing both on an interpersonal level, your businesses. And, I'd love to know your reasoning behind it. Is it strictly a tax thing that moved you here?
No, not at all. I mean,
but it's got to be a big benefit, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, you're talking to somebody whose life is consumed by taxes. So I'd be lying if I said that taxes wasn't a main
taxes
reason
fucking suck.
Damn right. I mean,
they suck when you don't get value out of them, which is how I feel about Canada. I wouldn't. I almost feel like I line Trudeau's pockets, and I hate the man.
Correct, and same with Newsom in California.
There you go.
I mean, you're not getting what you pay for when it comes to even the healthcare system. And
zero value.
So I mean, you got to remember too. Like, I have firsthand knowledge of these things from my own experiences, plus my clients.
Right.
And I'm immersed in my clients' daily lives, right? So I know what they're struggling with when it comes to, healthcare,
right,
taxes, their businesses, laws, regulations, you name it, right? So I don't just talk out of my ass.
Right.
I've actually got, hands-on experience dealing with things and involving myself in my clients' affairs. So, there's a lot I could say. I could probably write a book on it.
You probably should.
But,
I'll do a testimonial.
Yeah, well, you can do the forward. Thank you. But one day when I have some free time, I guess. And,
I don't think that's ever going to happen. You just bought a boat, didn't you? That's where your free time should be spent.
it should be, but
I understand it hasn't been.
See, and that's another reason I came to Florida. In California, it would be very hard to have that kind of lifestyle.
Why people aren't boat people in California?
First of all, there's not as many marinas and places to launch boats in California. It's, where are you going to go? You're going to launch your boat in the Pacific, right? It's not easy. Right. And, there's lakes and all that, but as far as boating culture goes, Florida
is a hotbed.
Is the hotbed. It's probably.
I think they just had the boat show here. I think it's the largest in the world.
It's got to be. Everybody here somehow is connected to boats. It's what I found.
I don't know if you'd know this, but I heard something. You can actually get a mortgage as a second mortgage for like a boat, and it's considered like a residential.
Yeah.
Can you explain that to me?
Well, so there is some rules regarding bathrooms. And some living quarters where it could qualify as a second residence for tax purposes.
Which means you can get a conventional mortgage. And can you homestead it?
The homesteading, I don't know. That's unique to Florida property taxes. I'm not too familiar with, but okay. But as far as writing off things like mortgage interest and taxes related to it, yeah, there's tax write-offs that you can take advantage of. And then I'll tell you, if you're a business owner,
right, and
you buy a boat, that can also be, it's the equivalent of like buying a plane, right? And a lot of businesses, private businesses, they'll buy their own planes because they can give them tax write-offs too. And so, if I've got some clients in the freight business and they use their boats to travel between, Florida and the Bahamas, for example.
Wow.
And so, there's ways you can write off these assets.
That's amazing.
But I didn't buy my boat because of that. I wanted something I could use to enjoy life and go fishing, So,
I was telling you this the other day. There's this saying, and I'm going to butcher it, but I think it goes something to the effect that the happiest moments for a boat owner is the first day they get their boat and then the day they sell it.
Yeah.
Does that seem to hold true to you right now?
So far it is. It's not as fun as I thought it would be.
Why? What happened?
Well, there's a lot of things you got to deal with when it comes to owning a boat. There's all these regulations you got to deal with, and then there's all this extra stuff you got to buy. There's the dockage. There's the.
So what does it run? It's relative.
Costly. It can be costly. And then on top of that too, you got to deal with the mechanical issues.
Which is what you're dealing with right now.
Unfortunately, right now I'm dealing with a mechanical issue, but and it's not easy to get somebody to come work on a boat. It's not like it's not like you can just take it to like a mechanic down the street and get it worked on. So
one of the things I said to my wife when we came down here is like, when we were looking at real estate originally, I saw a lot of the gated communities had these golf carts. People had golf carts. I'm fucking getting one of those for sure. The reason I haven't is that my gated community is somewhat small, so it would just be, it'd sit in my garage or take up space. So there's really no point to it. But I will eventually get one because they're also street legal. You can drive them. And the other one is a boat. When I had mentioned it to somebody that I wanted a boat, they're like, don't do that. Don't get a boat. But if you want to be in the water, you become a member of one of these boat clubs.
Right.
And you get a certain amount of hours and you don't have to worry about the boat and all that stuff. And I got to figure out whether my wife and kids are still boat people. But to go out in the boat and go fishing, to me would be like, when I can comfortably do that when we're settled here, I don't know when that day will be. And you and I will be on the boat and I can fish and I can have a couple of drinks and I don't have to worry about the phone or whatever, or like just taking care of the kids and stuff like that. I'll be like, okay, I now live in Florida. I live in paradise.
Totally.
Right.
I agree. And that's the thing, like,
I'm not there yet. I'm not even close, but yeah.
Going back to what your audience is, coming to listen to this podcast about is, coming from Toronto myself, having a boat over there, it's a luxury.
Absolutely.
And B, it's hard to have one even. You have to drive up north to take it out. It's hard to get it. Anywhere to store it.
To use it 6 months out of the year.
That's another thing I was going to say. At best, you're using maybe 6 months out of the year. So, it's
a flash of wealth for the most part. I don't know if you've seen this community that they have, Friday Harbor. It's just north of Toronto. It's It's in Lake Simcoe. It's beautiful. It's like a condo master plan community that has a lot of boats. And I think there's a Yiddish word for it. It's called schwitz, where people are schwitzing, showing off their goods. And it's really cool. And God bless them. And it's amazing that they have it. But when you start seeing like what you would pay for a place there plus a boat, if you were to sum that up, minus the flight, the convenience of driving down here, you can get way more value down here.
Absolutely.
Like exponentially more value for the same amount of money and guaranteed-ish weather as long as you're coming within a certain season. And there are some nasty times here that the seasons are like, they're not ideal, right? And the podcast called Can't Shovel Hurricanes because, they have hurricane season here, right? But I also don't have to shovel that shit. So, I fucking hate the winter. It's not enough of a reason to move, the weather. But holy wow, it certainly cracks the top 3 because there's a lot of things that you now take for granted that I constantly have to think of at home. And that's like dressing my kids. I cannot tell you how many times I've put snow pants on them and all this stuff and got them into the car seat, strapped them. It's taken easily an hour from the minute we said we're going to get them dressed all the way to the car, get them in the freaking car. And then I got to pee. You got to take them back out, start the whole process again. I'm like, I'm not going anywhere anymore. Here, Put on your sandals, put on your sunscreen, put on a hat, and let's go.
Exactly.
It's so much better.
I mean, I got used to California weather where I never, even needed to worry about an umbrella, whether it's going to rain, whether I needed a jacket.
What's the scene like in California right now coming down? Because the overwhelming majority of people that are coming down here, and I see it mainly from the school, like my kids' school, we were on a wait list a year prior. It is now 6 times the amount of wait list. And the overwhelming majority of people coming down, California, New York. Like I know from the school system and the stuff that's being pushed through the school system, most people don't agree. That was what lit the fuse for them to leave. But why did you leave California to Florida? Like, is there some one thing you can hang your hat on you could say, or is it a plethora of things?
It's a lot of things, but mainly, California's changed a lot.
In what way?
It used to be the Golden State, but now I don't know, not anymore. I mean, it's.
What's the scene like there? Is homelessness like what people describe?
The homelessness is bad. The crowdedness, the density.
What's okay? Why is this a haven for homelessness? Can someone explain this to me? Do you have any reason?
It's got to be political. I mean, when I first moved there, very, very few homeless people.
Where were you specifically in California?
Originally, I moved to Glendale, but I ended up living in Torrance in the South Bay. And I'll tell you, my place is like less than 5 miles from the beach over there. And I will tell you, the weather in the South Bay of California, I think is the best weather in the world.
Yeah, I've heard that.
It is year round. It's beautiful. I mean, that's the one thing I do miss about California is the weather. I think it's probably some of the best weather in the world. Okay. And, but like you said earlier, like sometimes weather is not the only thing that can drive your decision-making when it comes to where you want to live. And unfortunately, California just got too expensive.
Housing, day-to-day expenses,
taxes, crowded. It became hard. Depends where you go, I guess. Like Torrance.
I guess the same thing in Florida, right?
Yeah, Torrance is a very safe place. I mean, it's it's more of a suburban community.
Okay.
But so I never had issues.
So did you ever cross paths with any of the homelessness in Torrance?
Oh yeah. Well, eventually, and I'd lived there for a long time. And everything was great, and then all of a sudden, you start to see these homeless people showing up at the on ramps to the freeways, on ramps and the off ramps to the freeways, and setting up tents and their shopping carts and all.
Are they allowed to do this?
Of course, they're not. Police and government aren't going to say anything, right?
Why?
Look, you want me to answer that question? Vote for me and let me run for office. I'll
do it. I'd vote for you.
I'll clean this shit up.
No, right? Would you go back if that was cleaned up?
That's a good question. Probably not. I think Florida has a lot more potential for the future.
You told me that word before I ever set foot in this state, what does that mean to you? Potential. And I'm talking about people that, like me, have established networks, established businesses, friendships, relationships, center of influence, like those things, years to build. And you told me that there's tons of potential, right? What does that mean?
All right.
If you had to explain it to somebody, if you're selling the idea.
Let me put it to you this way. And this is what I realized coming out of Canada. When you're growing up in Canada, you think Canada's this big place, it's influential, it's et cetera. It's like, you've kind of got a myopic view of Canada. And until you get out of Canada and actually move to somewhere like the US, you realize how unimportant Canada actually is and how small it is. It's basically a fly in a horse's ass, relatively speaking. I mean, Canadians, don't get me wrong, I'm born and raised in Canada.
No, I get what you're saying. I'm talking about the visual, like the way people feel.
People don't understand the size differential between a place like America and Canada. The size of the American market is massive, huge. And Canada has nothing close. And Canada is still a very
socialist.
Well, definitely socialist. It's probably more now than when I was growing up.
Absolutely.
But it's a very sheltered society relative to the US. I think Canadians kind of still live in this little bubble and they think, the world is just what they see going on around them. But the reality is, Canada, and I'm not here to badmouth Canada.
No, dude, listen, if you were to ask me pre-COVID, if Canada would have gone to war with any country, including the United States, I would have taken up arms and fought for that country and laid my life down, because my entire family immigrated to Canada, or immigrants to Canada, owes Canada the opportunity for me to be down here. Like, it is an incredible place. It's safe. It allows for so much opportunity. It allows you to raise kids safely. It allows for you to do so many incredible things that 90% of the world would love to be in Canada. A lot of people vie and jockey to be there now, to this day. But the Canada that I grew up in doesn't exist anymore.
That's 100%.
And it has not existed since that fuck up Trudeau has been there. And definitely, like, the veil of comfort that Canadians lived under was stripped away when COVID hit, and the government, now in hindsight, everybody could see it, used that as a way to manipulate, scare, oppress, and absolutely control day-to-day living inside your home. And then your kids, your education, your access to things, killed small business, started giving away more so you could suckle at the teat of the government, and then it made you more comfortable with having that government be your great provider. And no government ever in history that takes away or gets that much power ever gives it away. Right there. And people don't fucking see it. And you only realize it when you step out. And then the divisiveness between people within Canada, depending on which financial, socioeconomic status you were in, you saw that people in the healthcare space, for example, that were like, pro doctors to get a vaccine and do all that. And I'm not fucking against the vaccine or anything like that, but that had access to people within the medical space when it was important to them. And COVID didn't really impact them because they circumvented it. Was telling everyone else to go through the process the way they had to, but when they needed it, they went right direct line because they had access. I've seen so many scenarios of the hypocrisy there. It was just crazy. Right. But yeah, so I get you're not bashing Canada. I'm not fucking bashing Canada. I hate the version of Canada that exists today. And I hope that will change. And Pierre Poilievre, who I've had the pleasure of meeting once, although briefly, seems to be saying the right things. But to me, a politician, when they say the truth, it's really by accident. And the best analogy that was ever given to me is like picking a politician is like sticking your hand in a pit full of vipers. And if you're lucky, you pick the least poisonous one. Right. And again, like, there's a place in need for all of these people. Right. But right now, what's happening in Canada, and I'm not the only one saying this, there is an exodus. There's people that are listening to this podcast that are thinking the same fucking thing, that are afraid to say it half the time because the minority is shutting them up.
Absolutely.
Sorry, I went on this fucking diatribe because it's really a passionate thing for me. And I think your thought process is quite similar to mine.
I mean, yeah, to an extent. I mean, I think, Canada is going to suffer from the brain drain problem, right? And that's like people like myself, very talented individuals, saw the potential in America, saw the opportunity in America. And the clients I work with, they're coming to America because of that potential and that opportunity. People in the medicine field, people in, entertainment, the business world, sports, you name it, right? And this is where I go back and say, like, if you just think Canada's like the be all and end all of places to be, you're missing out on a great opportunity of what America has to offer. Because I'll tell you, most of my clients who've come to the US, that's what helped them actually grow their business and help them prosper and build wealth. Okay. And building wealth in Canada is very hard.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, unless you're caught up in the housing Ponzi scheme over there, that's really a Canadian's wealth is their home. Right. But,
can you elaborate that? Because I never had anybody say it that way. And I've been in real estate in so many facets that I never.
Come on.
I didn't think of it from that angle.
Really? You didn't think of it as a Ponzi
No,
scheme?
because I was so immersed into it. Dude, yeah. Wow.
I mean, this is why the Bank of Canada probably can't raise rates anymore, even though you just saw the other day they had a really good job report, which ironically, you hear how Canada is adding 30-something thousand jobs a month, right?
Right.
Yet food banks are surging. People using food banks are surging, and there's more jobs than people there can fill. So something's going on over there. And at the end of the day, the government in Canada has to protect the housing market because most of their GDP, most of that country's, I think about 25% of Canada's GDP is tied to the housing market. So that's why I'm saying it's a Ponzi scheme. And so, eventually it's going to adjust because nothing goes up as vertical as the Canadian housing market did and not come crashing back down. Just hasn't happened. Go look at history, go look at places like Australia, Japan, some of these other countries, and who had similar housing bubbles like in Canada, and they all had their fair share of crashes.
So you're saying it's artificially being propped up by the Canadian government at the moment?
Because Canadians are asset rich and cash poor. And when I mean cash poor, I mean they don't have like money invested. Canadians don't invest.
They lack liquidity.
Thank you. They don't invest. They don't have and you got to remember, I see clients, right? I
get it. You are.
I see their financial affairs.
Yeah. No, I get it. The perspective that you're saying is just slightly terrifying and also very true.
Yeah. Like I'm hands-on, right? The one thing about working with me is I'm very hands-on in terms of dealing with clients, right? Like I'm like the quarterback, right? I don't
know how you fucking manage it, but yes, you are absolutely that guy that you're describing.
Yeah. So for me, I see what's going on, right? And, the day-to-day average Canadian is not really building wealth. Okay. Yeah. They've got their home and, they've got a little bit of money in the bank and they're able to pay their bills, but they're not really building wealth.
Yeah. The government takes care of a lot. Yeah. You go to healthcare. Now they've put in this daycare thing where it's $10 per day or stuff like that. People don't realize that while they think they're getting this stuff, they're paying for it indirectly. Yeah. Now they've become, what's the word? They've become very complacent, and they've also begun to rely on the government. And people don't realize that it happens in these baby steps. And they give you more. They give you more. They give you more to the point where they're giving you everything, but they're also telling you how to fucking live.
Yeah, and eventually the tide's going to turn, and people's attitudes are going to change, right? And that's hopefully people start to wake up and realize what's going on.
I hope so. I have a lot of family in Canada. I'm actually going back to Canada for work. I constantly go back and forth for my kids' stuff, for my business and stuff like that. But I keep telling people, I'm like, now that I've kind of stepped out a little bit and taken a look at the other side, and I'm not saying that this is some sort of utopia. And like, what do you think the major difference is between Floridians and Canadians? And I'm like, they have guns here. And I think if the government ran Florida like Trudeau runs Canada, there would be people on the streets like waging war because they're armed. I think that's, and I'm like, I know the Second Amendment's a massive thing here and it's a point of contention. I'm pro guns. I don't have any guns. I'm not opposed to people having guns. I'm opposed to bad guys having guns. And I don't know if anyone finds a way to weed out the morons from ever having firearms completely without banning good people. I think that person will win a Nobel Peace Prize. But I think that that's the separator between the two. But the thing that I really want to elaborate here on, and is you're talking about potential, right? And one of the biggest fears that listeners have, and depending on the type of visa they come down here for, whether it's a TN, which is a work visa, or they're on an E2 or an L1 or whatever other visas are out there, there is still an element of fear where people are afraid they'll fail. Right? Both as perception and both, like why leave a comfortable things? Because there's probably, you might be able to explain this even more, but I'd say that the majority of the client base that you're dealing with has built a little bit of a nest egg and has some acumen and some wealth to be able to transition, because there is this kind of like runway that you need financially to be able to attain your life while you're building up here. Right? So these people have already kind of established themselves in one way, shape, or form. But for whatever reason, political, a mixture of all of that, they decided to come down here. What have you seen has been the trend for the people that have, like me, have relocated, and where are they 2, 3, 4, 5 years from after the move?
Well, I think overall, I would say almost all the people I deal with are all better off after having made the move to the U.S. from Canada.
Even though they got to pay for their own healthcare. That's what I'm just thinking as a Canadian thinking, listening to this, they're like, yeah, but I got to pay for my own healthcare. I'm like, yeah, but you also are paying like 30% less in taxes.
Yeah. And you're paying for health. Look, I could tell you stories.
Tell me stories. I want to hear your story.
We could have a separate,
we will, but tell me, don't tease it.
Like I could tell you I've got wealthy clients in Canada who have had to come to the US, and pay out of pocket for everything from heart surgery to cancer treatment.
Why did they have to come to the States?
Combination of incompetence in the Canadian healthcare system, lack of talent in order to be able to, for example, a specific type of cancer one of my clients had. The people in Canada don't really, even this is at Mount Sinai, don't even really have the resources to deal with it. And so happens that the foremost expert in this type of cancer happens to be in the US. And, trying even to get the government to help you, like for example, OHIP, to help you get the proper treatment you need so you could save your life. You don't want to know how difficult that is.
I know how difficult that is. I'm actually one of those people that can tell you how difficult it is. And for my father, he was battling a cancer that there is really no cure for, but there's methods that are available and some experimental things within Canada. When we were in Canada, we had to privately pay for an immunotherapy drug. Like we had to pay, it was in the tens of thousands per shot. But for my father's treatment, we went to the States, we went to Washington. I forget what it was called, NAU or something like that. And then we went to Germany for treatment, because standard of care in Canada, over a long enough time horizon, it's not, people that are sick look for alternatives.
Yeah. And the problem is, number one, the Canadian healthcare system is good if you've got like a runny nose or a fever or something like that. It's good for those kind of conditions. But, when it comes to the more elaborate type of treatment, I mean, you will find the best of the best is in America. Yeah. And the facilities in America are better. I mean, listen, I know doctors. I've got clients that are doctors who've come from Canada to the U.S.
Okay.
Experts in their field. One of my clients is a
cancer. And why they left from Canada? Sorry, one of your clients is a cancer.
He's a cancer researcher, and works for a prestigious hospital in California. And they tell me.
What do they tell you?
Like I said, I'm not just talking out of my ass.
What did they tell you?
They're telling me what I'm telling you, and that is, the system in America when it comes to healthcare is a lot better. Versus the Canadian system. I mean,
better for the doctor, or better for the patient, or better for both?
Both. I mean, financially for the doctors, and then also as far as patient care goes. I mean, you have to remember the system in Canada is overstretched, right? I mean, it's funny because I had a few clients where, the doctors in Canada didn't even diagnose them with certain issues. And it was only because they came to the US and happened to get health coverage in the US that they went and got checked out. And that's when they discovered, oh, you've had this problem, you've got this issue, and you need to get it treated, and it's life-threatening or it's serious. So,
Wow.
even myself, like I had an eye situation where I was going to a doctor in Canada for regular eye exams back in the day, and they never diagnosed it. It wasn't until I happened to go see a doctor in the US who told me, well, you've got this eye condition and your cornea's misshapen and blah, blah, blah. And, so I had to end up getting treatment for it. Right. But I mean, I had that experience myself where I'd been going regularly to an optometrist in Canada and nobody said anything. And it was a condition that didn't just start. I mean, it's a condition that I had for many, many years. They told me easily 10 plus years. So, the Canadian healthcare system isn't all it's cracked up to be.
Yeah. I tell people all the time that it's really good until you need to use it.
Exactly. And you got to remember, a lot of people, when they come to the US, they get their healthcare through their employer,
right?
And so it's not like you're all, and when you're getting it through your employer, some companies pay for 100% of your health coverage.
Right. I don't fall into that category because we have to establish and reestablish or grow our businesses. So everything is an expense.
Yeah.
Right. But I can see the trajectory of where things are going. The difference between here in Canada for me is the ceiling is way higher here, or at least that's what it seems like. And I've seen people that are in the same space as me, and I'd say specifically in my wife's space, because for autism support, there is no insurance coverage in Canada. Mm-hmm. There's no insurance, period. I mean, that I know of, but it's all private pay. Mm-hmm. So unless you can afford to pay privately here, you have the option. And that's what I think separates specifically Florida from Ontario. And I would argue even New York and California, which is a majority, like there was 350,000 people that moved into Florida just last year, and there's more in the wings. They're coming down. And I think that even states like New York or California, the difference between Florida and them is choice. And they were given choices here. From a medical perspective, I think they all existed within those states. So that's very specific to Canadians. But they were given choice. And I think that's what it all comes down to, right? If we live in a democracy, we need to have choice. Democracy hasn't existed since Justin Trudeau's Canada was implemented, right? And if people don't believe that, they have no idea what they're talking about. Right. They either, watching the wrong news stations or don't live it. And people within Canada don't realize how much has been stripped away from them. And then you can only see it when you're on the other side of that coin.
Yeah. I used to say back during the lockdowns in Canada, I was saying the worst nightmare for the Canadian government would be if every Canadian got a ticket to come to Florida at that time and experience just life in Florida relative to what they were experiencing back home. And anybody without a dogma, about how they view all this, all the political science that was going on. I don't know if it was necessarily scientific.
The science has changed.
Of course it has.
I've never seen an evolution of science more than the one that's happening now. And they're backpedaling hard. And let me not just shit on Justin Trudeau and the Liberals. Ontario was run by Mr. Ford, a supposedly staunch conservative who shit the bed just as good as everybody else has. And I'll still have him as opposed to who the alternatives was. But it was the federal government playing the strings because they're the only ones distributing cash within the provinces. And everybody toed the line across the board, regardless of whether you were right or left or whatever the fuck else you were.
Yeah, it was a mass propaganda campaign.
Still going.
I mean, look, to get people to act the way they did, to think the way they did, that wasn't just free will. There was a lot of propaganda going on. And, we saw.
Now you saw that, right? Did your business grow a lot?
Yes.
During lockdown?
Yeah. Funny, it did. And I wasn't even expecting it. It caught me by surprise because we didn't, have the resources we should have had for the growth.
Wow. Who could have seen this, right?
I mean, while other businesses were shutting down and closing shop, we were thriving. And there was still a lot of people, moving. Well, I mean, you had some people leaving America to go to Canada. You had people leaving Canada to come to the US. And businesses, were still doing business across both sides of the border. So at the end of the day, business exploded. And it's been good. I can't complain. So maybe I shouldn't be so hard on what happened.
Well, I don't think you're hard on look. Anyone in business, if they're good at what they do, and then they're great like you are at what you do, and you actually get what was started off with this on the podcast, that you not only practice what you preach, like you get it, you get what people are going through. That helps a lot in the transition because there's such a fear element. Not just transition, logistically, it's a nightmare. Yeah. Right? Coming down.
And I'll tell you, for example, like one of the things most people don't realize when they move between countries, and in today's world, this is so very important, is credit.
Yeah.
You're coming from Canada.
Oh, I had a gentleman here, it was called the Credit Doctor. I did a podcast with him as well, and we're going to have a conversation with him. But you're treated like an 18-year-old college student.
Yeah. It's like you're a second-class citizen.
Yeah.
You don't have credit, we don't want to talk to you. And so people aren't prepared for that. People don't think about that ahead of time. How hard it's going to be to buy a car, how hard it's going to be to get a mortgage.
Yeah.
And even get credit cards.
So the podcast is staged outside of obviously having people's opinions and stuff like that as a resource towards building all that out. So we're talking about mortgages, we're talking about credit, we're talking about taxes, we're talking about departure taxes and the things. Where would you tell people to start when they've finally mentally committed to moving? And before you start that, I'm going to tell people from my perspective, when you mentally commit to moving, it has to be an all-in proposition. It can't be like, I'm coming back, take the islands, burn the ships. That's the one piece of advice I can offer. But from a strategic perspective, from a tax perspective, where would you tell people to start?
Well, as you mentioned earlier, like the people usually start by going to an immigration lawyer.
Right.
Okay. And part of the reason is this: a lot of people have a dream. Okay. Coming to America for a lot of people is a dream. And so who's the first person they want to go to is the immigration lawyer. Because they think the immigration lawyer is the one who can make this dream a reality.
Right.
And to an extent, you should be consulting with
absolutely.
But before you do that, you should talk to someone like myself, because I've been working with immigration lawyers for many, many, many years, and I also deal with the tax side. So someone like myself would be a great resource, because what ends up happening, what I've seen a lot of times happen, is they go to the immigration lawyer first. They'll tell me, hey, we want you to set up a business in America. Okay. And so you can get like an E2 visa or something like that.
Right.
But the problem is they don't consult with the CPA ahead of time on somebody with, cross-border tax knowledge, expertise to figure out how to go about structuring the business side of things.
Interesting.
Right? And so you get a situation where the immigration is leading the tax and the business and corporate side. And it should be actually reversed, because you're going to get yourself into more problems if you don't start with understanding your tax implications and your business implications before you start looking at the immigration side.
Right.
Okay. And that's, and so, a lot of times, we deal with clients that's like, well, why did you do this? Oh, well, the immigration lawyer said I needed to set up a business. Yeah, but did you realize that an LLC is not the best business for you right now because of your situation in Canada and the fact that you're not going to be able to leave Canada for a few more years, except because of all these other factors that are going on? And now you've just put yourself in a really bad tax situation on the Canadian side. So, talk to someone like myself, because I know enough to be dangerous on the on the immigration side, because of all the clients I've dealt with. So, and I could tell you like kind of what path you're probably going to go down from my experience.
How would people get in touch with you?
Well, they can go to our website, which is
plug it.
It's called Gedeon Law CPA, but I'll spell it. Gedeon is spelled with an E. So it's Golf Echo Delta Echo Orange November Law CPA.com.
Right.
You can also give us a call, 888-473-7967.
Right.
Or if you want, you can send us an email. It's info@GedeonLawCPA.com.
I'm also going to have your contact info in the write-up, but the people that are consuming this, that are driving, I want them to be able to listen to it and get to that. I can talk to you. I can speak from my experience as well, that you have to form a team around you of people that are like-minded, understand you, and can support you through this move. It is arguably the most difficult thing that anyone is going to do. I think a common mistake that people have, and it's an assumption that I had before I got here, is because we speak the same language, the transition will be easy. Nothing could be further from the truth. Even, the way people behave, conduct themselves, they're different, and they're coming from different parts of the United States. Florida is a melting pot in that respect. And you have so many people migrating here. And then you have a season literally where people like the snowbird season that are here.
Yeah. Tell me about it. Like that's one of the experiences I've discovered firsthand being in Florida for this part of the year is how many out of town people, out of state visitors they are. And what surprised me is how many people are from Quebec. Like I guess
really?
in where I'm at,
which is where
Fort Lauderdale, Pompano Beach area.
Okay.
It's like Quebec license plates everywhere.
Wow, they drove down.
And it took me by surprise. And I guess it's funny, I don't see as many Ontario plates as I do. I mean, I think the Quebec license plates outnumber the Ontario plates like 5-1.
I honestly have not seen that. I find that fascinating.
Oh, I see it firsthand.
I'm willing to bet that will change the further south you go when you get into like Aventura, Hollywood, Hallandale, Sunny Isles, Miami Beach. I guarantee you there'll be more Ontario plates.
Yeah, well,
maybe it's an assumption.
Look, if it's not somebody from New York or New Jersey or Massachusetts, they're from Quebec,
right?
And I will tell you this: the one thing I like about it is it creates a buzz.
Yeah.
And in LA, you kind of don't have this, experience where you have all these people coming in for a season, right? But in here, it creates like a buzz. You go to the restaurants, they're busy. People are in good spirits. They're in a good mood.
Sure.
They're getting together, playing tennis, golf.
Tennis is a religion here.
Oh yeah. It's
and pickleball.
Oh yeah. Pickleball too.
I keep being told that I've got to try pickleball. I got to try pickleball. Really, I don't have that much time. By the time it's like, I'm not joking, 8:39, I'm usually in bed because I start my day at 5 and managing the kids and life and all that stuff. I'll tell you something that is like really unique to people that have come down here and the relationships that you and I have somewhat formed. I find that like we speak 5% about like business and we speak 95% about life and the transition and the stuff that we encounter coming down here.
Yeah. So let me speak to that because I'll tell you this. So when I first left Canada and moved to the US, I thought, coming to America was going to be, easy.
False.
Well, no. Let me culturally. I want to explain.
False.
I want to explain it this way. We grow up watching American television, right? And growing up in Toronto, you're watching all the American television, all American shows.
Mm-hmm.
We follow all the American music and media and everything, right? So growing up in Canada, you feel you're already immersed in the American culture.
Right. Just another state.
We're the 51st state up there.
Yeah.
Right? And then I come to America and it's like, I'm like, I've been like Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz. I'm like, I'm not in Kansas anymore.
Right.
And I started to realize, what difference there is culturally in America versus Canada.
Sure.
And for example, like, Americans are much more aggressive than Canadians.
In every aspect.
In every aspect. And something also that will probably shock Canadians is Americans are a lot more friendlier, than Canadians.
Really?
Oh man!
Oh my God!
Canadians take pride in that. They're Mr. Nice or Miss Nice.
They're Mr. and Mrs. Complacent.
They are fooling themselves. Okay,
Yeah.
I will tell you, the Americans are by far way nicer than they're aggressive. Don't get me wrong, but they're more nicer, more friendlier than.
You mean hospitable?
More hospitable,
right?
Than what I experienced in Canada. And
Canadians can be frigid.
And they've got something stuck up their ass sometimes.
I can't explain it any better than that.
And so
I know I'm one of them.
Yeah, well,
I don't think I made this transition.
Yeah, but so it took me, and I'll tell you, I got homesick when I first moved, right?
Right.
And I missed what I perceived to be Canadian culture, and because you come to America, you realize that you don't really see that Canadian culture anymore. You're not experiencing it. And so I missed it, and so I was fortunate enough at the time to join a group in California and Los Angeles called Canadians Abroad.
Okay.
And there were some really good people. And I would tell anybody that's moving to California, to LA in particular, and there's also another great organization up in the Bay Area too, Digital Moose Lounge. But I joined this group. And at the time, it was a lot of people like myself, young professionals, highly educated, successful, who'd left Canada to come to the US for better opportunities. And so, this group became a really good support network, for me and for everybody. And it was a great way to network and get, we had all sorts of fun, right? And I would definitely recommend people look at joining one of these expat groups if you first move here. It's a great way to get to know people and all that. But eventually, and I didn't just see it with myself, but all the same people that I was with in this group, we all started to become more and more American and less, and identify less as, we started to identify less as Canadians. And it's a combination of things, right? You time. Like, I look at myself, I say, I've been in the US over more than half my life. I don't even consider myself a Canadian. I'm an American. And I'm born in Canada, but I don't perceive myself to be a Canadian. Ideologically,
what is an ideological Canadian?
I think you already know the answer.
I want to hear you say it, because I've been the one saying it for a while. And for a lot of people that weren't in the same space as me, and I'm talking about that divide within Canada, like, I'm like some sort of lunatic. And then when I come down here, what a lot of people tell me is that I'm like Republican light. I'm not even close to it. And I would agree with that, because if there was a centrist party within the United States, I think it would like kill it, because it would get people from both, because you pick two teams here. Right now, I can't vote and I don't want to vote. And quite frankly, I don't have cable anymore and I don't read the news as much. I don't give a shit, because I am so hyper focused on my energy, on my family and my existence, which has been a blessing for me in so many ways, both in the people that I've attracted, the world that I now look at, perception. The rest has all been fucking noise. But like, I know my perspective is identical to yours, but the ideology of your prototypical Canadian is what, in your opinion? Are you come on, out with it.
I would say, Canadians are, how can I put it in?
Why don't put it in any way except, I'm not trying to shit on people here. We have to let's clarify this. I just want to people to understand that there is a divide between with us and them. And I would put myself in the Canadian thing, because I could put in the Canadian camp.
Okay, look, I think Canadians, maybe I'll put it this way. I think Canadians are a bit more small-minded than Americans are. Okay. And
I don't think you're saying that in a negative light. I think they're just, from what they have been exposed to, and once they see the other side, how much of a larger market it is and how different people are. I get what you're saying. It's not a slight. It's just a matter of speaking.
I can't tell you how
that's
many.
fact.
I can't tell you how many of my clients will come to me and say, "Mark, it's so much easier to do business here in America than it ever was in Canada." In Canada, trying to get people to commit to doing a deal, it's impossible.
Why do you think that is?
It's their mentality. They're tight. They're not as they're more risk averse.
So that you think that's a main differentiating point between Americans and Canadians on the business side?
Of course,
they're risk takers.
Oh, risk takers, aggressive, big thinkers. They have more resources, more capital. Look, I tell you, if I could write a book on all the,
why don't you write a book?
I will.
What's stopping you from writing a book?
I need more time. I gotta find time just to enjoy my boat. Then I can take some time.
I'll be honest with you. There are so many resources out there, and I know because we're looking down that path as well. Of you don't have to worry about this aspect of how to write the book. You just have to be the individual to team up with somebody to write a book. And there's incredible resources out there today. And I'll talk to you about them from what I know offline. But I think that there's a market for all this. And I'm not saying this is necessarily a business venture, but I think someone like you is an incredible resource for people who are on the fence right now. And to those people that are on the fence, and the only reason you're doing it is because of fear, you're still on the fence, do it. Absolutely do it. And there's so many resources here.
But I'll tell you, someone like myself will always give you an honest opinion.
Yes.
I speak with clients all the time and I tell them, listen, let's talk. Let's go over your situation. Cause I've seen enough. Like I've been through it myself. I've dealt with so many clients. I know what lies ahead and I can already kind of envision what you'd be experiencing. So start with someone like myself, because I'll give you a blunt and honest opinion. I'm not going to bullshit you just to try and get your business. If I think you're not going to make it, or your idea won't fly in America, or you're better off just staying in Canada or whatever, I'll tell you, because I've seen a lot of people who've come to America and they didn't have the right plan in place. They were really just chasing a dream, and they ended up wasting all their money, losing a lot of their money, trying to chase a dream, never worked. And they end up having to go back to Canada with their tail between their legs.
Sure.
So if you can avoid that, talk to somebody like myself. It's definitely worth getting my perspective, I think, on what you'd be experiencing. And, I deal with everybody, with people that have got businesses, family, people who are moving for business, family, employment, you name it. I've been there, done that. I've seen it all. And I can give you a real good assessment of your situation. If you're thinking about making the move, talk to me first, and I'm always back and forth between, the US and Canada. So, even though I've been out of Canada for a really, really long time right now, I still, spend some time there.
You fly back consistently though. Like I know last time I spoke to you were there.
Yeah, I do. Yeah. But I go back now and I feel like I'm a foreigner in my own country, I guess,
I'm going back in a couple of days and I'm telling you, I haven't left. I already want to come back. It also has nothing to do with specifically Canada. It just has to do with just like every time you're traveling, it's like you put a pause on life, and there's so much going on for us in the building phase. And psychologically, I can speak to that. I'm not just like technically to a lot of people, and the psychological game of the move is by far and away the biggest challenge that families will face, husband and wife will face, and then husband separately, wife separately. And you got this stuff, but there are incredible people around you. There are incredible resources here that we want to help. It's also very self-fulfilling because feeling good to help other people is quite gratifying, and we can create incredible bonds and networks that will translate to business and a few other things. So I'm going to for sure have you on the podcast at least one more time, because I think we've only scratched the surface of so much information, and we can get into the technical aspect of things.
So next time you have a podcast, let's do it in the afternoon. We'll get some drinks,
Oh, you want to do this tipsy?
Oh, come on.
And then we're going to talk tax.
Then you can get the real me to come out.
You know what? That's a fucking deal.
Get me some Jack Daniels. All right. And we'll even have some Canadian Club too.
You know what? I guarantee you we will do this.
Let's do it.
I will make sure that we do this. I can't tell you how grateful I am for your time. the fact that like you stepped out on arguably the most challenging time for you, and you're going through a transition into Florida. That speaks volumes to your character. And I can tell people from my own experience that it's been a privilege to be able to meet people like you, because you give us comfort that we know that there's a resource to turn to on, money is a major thing. Don't get it twisted, but you can understand it from a perspective that nobody else can probably offer because of your own life experience.
I can point you in the right direction, whether it comes to getting your banking affairs set up properly in the US and Canada, even before you leave or go to the other country, credit, you name it. That's why I say I'm like the quarterback, and I know all the plays.
Right.
So, who's the most important person on a football team is the quarterback, right? So always have a good quarterback on your team. You're gonna.
You need hockey analogies to relate to a lot of these people, but yeah, it's usually the
okay. I'm like the goalie,
right?
You need a good goalie in net.
Man, you're the best. I appreciate your time. We're gonna do this again. I hope you survive tax season, and I'll see you soon.